Let's talk all things public health this morning, including the fight between Novo Nordisk and hims and hers over GLP-1 drugs. Joining us right now is CNBC contributor Dr. Scott Gottlieb. He is the former commissioner of the FDA, and he serves on the boards of both Illumina, Pfizer, and United Health. He's also on the CNBC Cures Advisory Board. And Scott, thank you for coming in today.
Thanks a lot.
Break this down for us. Hims and hers, a big splashy announcement last week that they were going to be offering this GLP-1 that was basically the same as the Novo Nordisk GLP-1. What happened? The FDA stepped in pretty quickly.
Yeah, well, first on what they were trying to do and then on the action that FDA seems to be taking. They claim that they had formulated a version of this oral drug that Novo Nordisk has that is comparable in terms of delivering the same benefit but uses a different technology. So what Novo had done is they had formulated this pill, the semaglutide.
Yeah.
Right, it's the only pill, but it's actually the peptide in an oral formulation. The problem with taking peptides orally is they get broken down into the stomach by the stomach acid. So you have to encapsulate them in some way that you get some absorption of the drug. And Novo had this special technology. They had acquired it from a company called Emisphere in, I think, 2020 for $1.8 billion.
Close to $2 billion.
Right, that allowed about 2% of the drug to get absorbed. And so that technology is patented. So what Hims and Hers said is that they had a different technology using a liposomal formulation. We don't know exactly what that was, that allowed the drug to also be absorbed. Now, if that's true, then this is an unapproved new drug because it's using a new technology to try to get the oral absorption. With respect to what FDA did, it was an interesting announcement in that the Department of Health and Human Services General Counsel said that they made a referral to DOJ right from the outset. Now, typically, FDA would take its own enforcement action. They might send a warning letter. They might do an investigation, either civil or criminal. The only reason I could think of why you would make an initial referral to DOJ before you took an enforcement action is if you want to go to court. Because if FDA wants to stand in front of a judge, they need to have DOJ on their side. DOJ will litigate in court. So the reasons you might go to court would be for an injunction, a temporary restraining order, a seizure.
We're not going to let you sell this at all.
Right. So if they're stepping in to effectuate a seizure, they're going to send marshals in. Now, this is all speculation, but I usually went to DOJ after I had already done an investigation. The few times that I went to DOJ at the outset was when I needed to effectuate a seizure.
Look, the people who are looking for reasons to slam big pharma over this will say, well, they're just trying to protect a very expensive pill. Let us have this. Your point is this could be dangerous or just downright fraudulent. Well,
it could not work, first of all. It's an unapproved new drug. It's never been tested. I mean, we have a drug approval process for a reason to ensure that drugs are safe and effective. If any company can operate under the guise of a pharmacy license, come up with completely novel formulations of drugs and market them directly to consumers, why have a drug approval process? I mean, we could have this policy debate.
What's the situation with Hims and Hers? They seem to play kind of fast and loose with some of the partnerships that have collapsed and fallen apart before. How do you read it?
Yeah, look, well, my perception is that they have been aggressive in the market and regulators have been permissive to date. And so I think they continue to push the line. If you look at Roe, for example, I think Zach is operating, the CEO there is operating in a very responsible fashion. He's trying to partner with companies. He's also compounding drugs. But I think they have more compliance around what they're doing. My perception is that Hims and Hers just has tried to push the line progressively and probably didn't think this would be stepping across it.
So two questions. One is your read of what happened over the weekend between the two means that you think a deal ultimately is struck between Hims and Hers and Novo, that Novo just stops doing this completely, that they try to get it. I can't imagine they're not going to try to be in this market somehow. The question is, how, in my mind?
Yeah, well, they're in the market with these compounded formulations of the injectable. I don't think they're going to be able to sell this pill. I doubt any pharmaceutical company is going to cut a deal with them because they're not perceived in the industry as the sort of good actor in this space. You see the drug companies partnering with Roe because they're trying to operate in a compliant fashion. I don't think they're going to be allowed to sell this pill. And I think that's why they probably withdrew it from the market very quickly, because if FDA is going to DOJ, they're going to DOJ because they're going to take some kind of action. There's both civil and criminal penalties
here. So where do you think this lands? I mean, I'm imagining...
Criminal penalties, so they could still come?
Well, there's consumer fraud issues with respect to the FTC, but you could look at this from both a civil and a criminal standpoint. I don't know if this drug was actually... It was shipped. I don't know if patients actually took it, but once patients swallowed those pills, there's other issues.
But in terms of what the deal is between these companies and Roe, for example, how does that even work? What does that look like? Because there is some kind of discount already taking place.
Yeah, look, I think the companies have been aggressively discounting, right? So, Lilly's going to be in a battle with Novo over the oral drug once orforglipron comes onto the market. I think they're looking for different channels to reach different pockets of the consumer audience. And these sort of direct-to-patient models and these telehealth models provide one avenue.
Right.
And so they're building their own. Lilly has Lilly Direct. But if they could partner with a company like Roe, and Roe can get in the regulatory compliance around this and do it in a fashion that's legal and compliant and satisfies lawyers at Lilly and Novo, that's just another channel.
So what would prevent Hims and Hers from doing that?
Well, they could have gone that route, right? But
I'm saying they didn't so far, but
right.
You don't think that they switched courses?
Yeah, I don't think they can. Well, my assumption is they can't pivot into that now. I don't know. The companies are very worried about the compliance around these functions. I think that's why companies have struggled to build their own direct-to-patient models. And so these platforms like Roe have done a good job building this out. So I think someone who could step into this market and do it in a compliant fashion can partner with drug companies. I don't think drug companies are going to have confidence that Hims and Hers is suddenly going to become very compliant. They've tried to push the edge. I think they would probably admit that. And that's my perception. So I don't know that they're going to be the go-to partner here.
Hey, Scott, before you go, I want to talk about an op-ed that you had in the Washington Post. Was it Friday that it came
That's
out?
right. It was Sunday, yeah.
Okay, Sunday that it came out on this. This is a really important op-ed because you open up and talk about some health struggles that you've had over time and tie it back to what's happening with immunization policies right now. I don't want to steal your thunder. Why don't you talk a little bit about your diagnosis with lymphoma and how that came from Epstein-Barr virus?
Yeah, look, the framing of this is that one of the central pillars of the sort of anti-vaccine movement is that these viruses aren't that bad, that measles isn't that bad. In fact, the Children's Defense Fund, Secretary Kennedy's group, tweeted that over the weekend, that we shouldn't fear measles. And my argument is that a lot of viral infections, people recover and don't have consequences, but in a lot of cases they have long-term sequelae. In my case, I had Epstein-Barr virus. 90% of us do. About 1/4 will develop mono. For most people, it's seen as a rite of passage. Some portion of the population have long-term consequences. In my case, I developed a B-cell lymphoma that was EBV positive, meaning if I never had the virus, I never would have gotten that cancer. We now have a lot of literature that EBV, Epstein-Barr virus, can be a causative factor in multiple sclerosis and maybe the single causative factor. It's probably a causative factor in autoimmune diseases like lupus. We now know that. So there's a lot of long-term consequences of these viruses. We know HPV causes cancer. We know HSV1 probably is a causative factor in Alzheimer's disease. Enteroviruses cause type 1 diabetes. And so some portion of the population that become infected with these viruses do have long-term consequences. And so that's why we think about vaccinating children for them. I mean, if in the future, people were working on EBV vaccines. A lot of that has pulled back now because of Epstein-Barr virus, right? A lot of that has pulled back now because of the anti-vax movement in this country. But if we could, in the future, potentially vaccinate children for that, prevent the B-cell cancers like what I have, and maybe prevent multiple sclerosis and lupus, that might be a good thing. We might want that option. I think that option is being foreclosed right now because research money is coming out of these endeavors because of what's happening in this broader environment, and that's a shame.
Meaning that pharmaceutical companies think there's not a market here, we're going to have too tough of a time getting through the regulatory bar for this, and then potentially trying to convince the population to do these things? I
think it's very clear now, and I think it's going to become more clear that it's very hard to get a new vaccine through the FDA because of the change in policies, directed by the secretary. And then once you do, is the advisory committee to the CDC going to recommend use of that vaccine? They've shown that they're not willing to do that for a lot of the existing vaccines. And so I think a lot of the certainly the venture capital, I work in the venture capital space, I'm a partner at a venture capital firm. It's very hard to get a new vaccine program funded in a venture capital syndicate. The big companies are still in this. I think they're still going to make investments. But even there, I think people are going to be much more cautious because the environment's just too difficult.